The hum of the starship was steady and low, a constant background song that had become part of life for everyone aboard. Daniel stood by the wide observation window in his quarters, his eyes drifting over the alien planet below. It was beautiful. In a strange way, its surface glimmering with silver oceans and vast forests that seemed to glow faintly under the pale light of its twin moons. This was supposed to be a diplomatic mission, a simple posting to watch over a treaty and ensure peace between two species that had once been bitter enemies. Yet here he was, caught in a situation he had never imagined. The door behind him slid open without warning, and when he turned, she was there. The alien woman who had been assigned to him since the day the treaty was signed. She walked in slowly, her steps soundless on the smooth floor, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel as though the air between them had thickened. Her people called her Lyra, a name that carried a soft and lyrical sound in their language. She was taller than most human women, her skin a pale shade with a faint shimmer that caught the light, her hair long and dark like polished metal, her eyes bright and unsettling in their beauty. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft whisper of the ship's ventilation and the faint hum of the engines. Then, without breaking eye contact, she began to untie the thin, flowing garment she wore. It was the traditional dress of her people, a symbol of formality and ceremony, but now she let it slip from her shoulders until it pooled silently at her feet. Her voice came softly, but every word was sharp enough to cut through the stillness. "It's been a month, human. Why haven't you taken me yet?" The words were simple, but they hit him with the force of a physical blow. Daniel stared at her, unsure whether to step forward or step back. He had known this moment might come. The treaty between their species had an unusual clause, one that had sparked endless debate back on Earth. In certain cases, an alien envoy would be bonded to a human officer, a bond that was meant to symbolize unity, trust, and the merging of two cultures. To her people, that bond was sealed not with handshakes or words, but with intimacy. It was an act that carried not only physical meaning but political weight, a public declaration that two enemies were now one. Daniel had avoided it. He had avoided her. Not because she was unattractive, she was mesmerizing in a way that unsettled him, but because he could not bring himself to follow a tradition that felt more like ownership than partnership. In his mind, it was wrong to treat her as something he could claim simply because a piece of paper said so. He took a slow breath, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Because you're not an object," he said quietly, his words steady but firm, "and I won't treat you like one." Her brow furrowed slightly, as if the meaning behind his words was something strange and hard to understand. She took a step closer, her bare feet making no sound against the floor. "In my world," she said, "this is not ownership. This is respect. This is honor. You were given me as a sign that peace is real." Her voice trembled faintly at the edges, though she seemed to fight to keep it steady. "When you refuse, it tells my people I was not worthy. That I am less." The pain in her voice caught him off guard. He had thought she might be angry at his refusal, but this was not anger. It was something deeper, something raw. She wasn't trying to seduce him for pleasure or even duty. She was asking because to her, his rejection was a public wound, one that cut into her pride and her place among her people. He turned away from the window and faced her fully now, his hands loosely at his sides. "It's not about you not being worthy," he said, his voice low. "It's about me not wanting to pretend. If I do this just because your leaders expect it, then what does it mean? Nothing. It would be a lie." She looked down at the garment on the floor, her jaw tightening. "To you, maybe it means nothing. But to me, it means survival. To my family, it means honor restored. Every day you delay, I lose more in the eyes of my people." Her words settled heavily between them. Daniel felt a flicker of unease in his chest. He had thought his refusal was the moral choice, the right way to resist an outdated tradition. But now he wondered if his stance was hurting her more than it was protecting her. Still, he couldn't give in simply because it was expected. For a long moment, they stood in silence. The planet below continued its slow rotation, the twin moons casting shifting patterns of light through the window. Somewhere deep in the ship, a low signal tone sounded, the kind of noise that marked the passing of another hour. Time seemed to stretch in the room, each second heavier than the last. Finally, she bent down and picked up her garment, slipping it back over her shoulders with movements that were careful and deliberate. She tied it closed without looking at him, her expression unreadable. "You think you are protecting me," she said softly, almost to herself. "But you are only delaying what will come." She turned toward the door, her back straight, her head high, and for the first time since she had entered, Daniel saw something in her posture that looked like defeat. Not the defeat of someone who had lost a fight, but the quiet, resigned kind that comes when you realize the choice was never really yours to begin with. As the door slid shut behind her, Daniel stood alone in the dim light, the hum of the ship filling the space where her voice had been. He told himself he had done the right thing. Yet deep down, a question lingered, one he didn't want to face. If refusing her meant keeping his principles, but cost her everything, was it still the right choice? Far below, the alien world turned. Slowly beneath them, its silver oceans catching the light like shards of broken glass. The next morning the ship was quiet in that strange way it sometimes became when most of the crew were either asleep or deep in their duties far from the living quarters. Daniel had barely slept, his mind replaying the scene from the night before. Over and over, every detail burned into his memory. The look in Lyra's eyes when she spoke, the way her voice had carried a weight he had not understood until it was too late, the soundless grace with which she left him standing there feeling like he had done something wrong without even realizing what it was. He sat at the small table in his quarters, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling beside him as he stared at a datapad that had long since gone dark. He could not focus on reports or schedules. His thoughts kept circling back to her. It was not just the words she had spoken, but the shadow behind them, something unspoken, something that felt heavier than the ceremonial traditions they were both trapped in. He had thought her request was simply the product of cultural expectation, but now he was beginning to think it was something else entirely. When the door chimed, he knew before it opened that it would be her. She entered without hesitation, standing just inside the threshold. As though waiting for him to decide whether she was welcome, he gestured for her to sit, and she crossed the room. Without speaking, settling into the chair across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her posture straight and formal, but her eyes holding that same faint hurt he had seen before. "You should know what my people believe about you," she said at last, her voice calm but lacking the softness it had held before. "They believe humans take what they want without asking. They believe you are a race of conquerors who hide sharp claws under polite words. I asked to be bonded to you because I thought perhaps the stories were wrong, but your refusal has been noticed." She paused as though weighing whether to continue. "If word reaches the council that I was given to a human who would not claim me, it will not be seen as noble restraint. It will be seen as weakness on my part and a mistake on theirs." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his fingers tightening around the cup, though he had not yet lifted it. "You're saying they will punish you for my decision?" She looked at him steadily. "Yes, in my culture, when a bond is refused, the one offered is considered tainted, unworthy. They lose status, their family loses face, and in some cases, if the council wishes to make an example, there are harsher outcomes." The thought of harsher outcomes made his stomach knot. What kind of harsher outcomes? Her gaze dropped to her hands. "Reassignment to the reconditioning halls," she said quietly, and when she said those words, her voice changed, ever so slightly, as though she was remembering something she would rather forget. "Few who go there return, and those who do are not the same." A cold chill settled over He had heard rumors about such places during the war whispered among soldiers who had fought in the outer systems, but the reports were always buried under layers of politics and denials. Hearing it now from her lips gave the rumors a solid, unshakable truth. He tried to speak but found his words slow and heavy. Why didn't you tell me this before? I thought I could make you choose without telling you, she admitted, her voice low. If you did it out of pity, it would be hollow. I wanted you to see me as someone worth choosing, not as someone you were forced to save. Her honesty struck him harder than any accusation could have. She was not trying to manipulate him for power or personal gain. She was trying to hold on to her dignity in a system that had already decided her worth, and she had gambled that he might be different from the humans in the old stories, the ones her people feared and hated. She had gambled, and so far she was losing. He thought about the war, about the villages burned to ash, and the faces of people who had been told they were just pieces in a larger game. He had fought to end that cycle, but now he saw it repeating here in a quieter, more personal way, and this time he was part of it. You said the council has noticed my refusal, he said slowly. How much time before they act? Not long, she replied. They watch the first month closely to see how the bond is formed. After that, they decide if it should continue or be recalled. You have already used that month. Her tone was flat, not accusing, simply stating the truth. He realized then that her visit today was not casual. It was a warning, maybe even a farewell. He studied her face, the calm surface that hid tension underneath, and wondered how many more days they had before someone far away made a decision neither of them could undo. The ship's intercom broke the moment, calling him to a duty meeting in the forward briefing room. He acknowledged the call, but neither of them moved right away. Finally, she rose from her chair, her movements as precise and deliberate. As always, I will not beg you, she said. If you decide to act, it will be because you choose to, not because I forced you. She turned to leave, and for a second, Daniel thought of letting her go, letting the council take her back, and telling himself there was nothing he could do. But something deep inside rebelled against that thought. He had seen too many people taken by forces they could not fight, and he had sworn long ago that he would not stand by and watch it happen again. As the door closed behind her, he felt the weight of time pressing down heavier than the ship's artificial gravity, and somewhere in the back of his mind a plan was beginning to take shape, though he did not yet know what it was. He only knew he had to find a way to keep her from going back to that world, and that once he started, there would be no turning back. Night settled over the ship in a way that was almost deceptive, because in space there was no real night, only the artificial cycle of lights dimming and the quiet hum of systems shifting to lower power. Daniel lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, but his mind was wide awake, filled with images of Lyra's face and the words she had spoken earlier in the day. There was something in her tone that stayed with him, a mixture of resignation and determination, as if she had already decided on a path and nothing, he said, could change it. The soft sound of the corridor door sliding open reached his ears, and his instincts from years of service told him something was not right. He rose without making a sound and stepped into the hallway, his eyes adjusting quickly to the dim emergency lighting that always glowed faintly during rest cycles. A faint movement at the far end caught his attention, a slim figure moving quickly and quietly carrying what looked like a travel pack. He knew instantly it was her. Followed at a distance, his footsteps slow and silent until she reached the small docking bay reserved for shuttle maintenance. She moved with purpose, entering the bay and heading straight for one of the compact transport pods. His pulse quickened because he knew what this meant. She was leaving. Daniel stepped forward and spoke her name, his voice firm enough to make her freeze. She turned slowly, the pack still in her hands, her eyes widening just slightly before narrowing again, as if preparing herself for an argument. You should not be here, she said, her voice low but steady. And you should not be leaving, he replied, closing the distance between them until only a few steps separated them. Where were you planning to go in that pod, Lyra? You know you would never make it past the patrol lines alone. Her lips pressed into a thin line before she answered. Back to my world. That's suicide, he said, his tone sharper than he intended. You just told me what would happen if they took you back. Why would you walk straight into it? Her gaze shifted away for a moment, and when she spoke again, there was a quiet tremor in her words. Because if I return on my own, they may judge me less harshly than if they send someone to drag me back. They will see it as obedience, and perhaps they will spare my family the shame. Daniel shook his head, refusing to accept her reasoning. You think they will spare you because you went willingly. No, they will use you as an example to scare others into obedience. That's how these systems work, and you know it. She set the pack down slowly, as if the weight of his words had made it heavier. You speak as though you know my people's ways better than I do, she said quietly. I know control when I see it, he answered. I've seen it on 100 worlds, and it always follows the same pattern. Break the will, make the people believe they chose it themselves, and they will never fight back. Her eyes met his, then sharp and searching. Do you want to know why? I volunteered for this bond in the first place. Daniel felt the air in the room change, as though something important was about to be revealed. Yes, he said. She took a deep breath, and for a moment she looked almost vulnerable. Because I wanted to see if the stories were wrong, she began. I grew up hearing about the human warships, the cities you destroyed, the way you took planets and made them yours. We were taught that humans would always take what they wanted and never give anything back. But I also heard whispers from those who had seen something else, mercy in the middle of battle, soldiers who spared lives when they could have ended them. I wanted to know which was true. I thought if I was bonded to one of you, I would see the truth for myself. Daniel listened without interrupting, every word pulling him deeper into her world. And what have you seen? He asked, her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. I have seen that you are not what they told us, but I have also seen that your kindness may destroy me. Those words struck him harder than any insult could have, because they carried no malice, only truth. If I had known the danger, sooner I would have acted, he said. She shook her head. If you had acted sooner without knowing, you would not have been the man I hoped you were. For a long moment they stood in silence, the hum of the ship filling the space between their words. Finally Daniel stepped forward and took the pack from her hands, setting it on the floor beside them. You are not leaving, he said, his tone calm but unyielding. If they want to take you back, they will have to go through me. Her expression softened slightly, but there was still a shadow in her eyes. You cannot fight a council with weapons and win. Then I'll fight them with something stronger, he said. She tilted her head. And what is that? Choice, he replied. The one thing they cannot control unless we let them. There was something in his voice that made her pause, as if the idea had planted itself in her mind, even against her will, and though she did not agree aloud, she no longer reached for the pack. The intercom crackled, suddenly breaking the tension, and a sharp voice announced that an incoming transmission from her planet had been received with orders for her immediate return. Daniel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them, and he saw in her eyes the flicker of fear she could not quite hide. He knew then that time was up. The council had made its decision, and whatever happened next would decide not only her fate, but the fragile peace between their worlds. The sound of the transmission still echoed in Daniel's ears as he stood in the small docking bay with Lyra beside him. The voice from her homeworld had been cold and precise, stating that a retrieval vessel was already on its way to collect her. There had been no room for negotiation, no sign of patience. It was the kind of message meant to remind them both that the council's word was final, and that defiance would only make things worse for everyone involved. But Daniel had already decided that he was not going to let them take her without a fight. They left the bay and walked quickly through the corridors of the ship, the hum of the engines beneath their feet like the steady beat of a war drum. Crew members passed them in the narrow halls, giving quick salutes or curious glances, but no one Spoke Daniel's face carried a look that told them now was not the time for questions. When they reached the command deck, the captain turned from the central display, where the outlines of several approaching ships were glowing on the tactical map. They are within 6 hours, the captain said, his tone clipped. They have sent their orders directly to us. As well, they claim it is part of the treaty, and that we are required to comply. Daniel stepped forward. Then tell them the treaty also requires mutual consent, and that she does not consent to be taken back. The captain's eyes narrowed. That is not how they interpret the agreement. Then maybe it is time someone showed them how humans interpret it, Daniel said, his voice low but carrying the weight of someone who had already made up his mind. He turned to the communications officer. Open the diplomatic channel to the council now, and make sure it is broadcast on all public lines. The officer hesitated, glancing toward the captain, who gave a reluctant nod within seconds. The large display on the forward wall lit up with the image of the council chamber, back on Lyra's homeworld. Tall figures draped in ceremonial robes stood behind a long curved table, their faces calm and impassive in the way of politicians who had learned to hide any trace of human emotion. One of them spoke, his voice deep and resonant. Human Officer Daniel, we are here to retrieve our envoy Lyra. She has failed to complete the bonding process within the required time the treaty demands. Her return for reassignment. Daniel stepped closer to the display. With respect, the treaty demands nothing of the sort. It says the bond must be formed through mutual agreement and consent. I do not claim her as property, and she does not wish to return. Therefore, the bond is complete by our terms. A ripple of disapproval passed through the council members, though their expressions remained controlled. Your terms are not relevant in this matter, human, the speaker said. You will prepare her for transfer immediately. Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he said simply, and then before they could respond, he turned to the communications officer. Transmit this to the open network of their world and ours. The officer's fingers flew across the console, and within moments, the link expanded to a broader audience. Millions across both species could now hear every word. Daniel faced the council again. If you take her against her will, it will not be an act of treaty enforcement. It will be an act of abduction, and every world listening will know it. Beside him, Lyra stood silent, but her eyes were wide at the risk he was taking. Her people were not accustomed to such direct public defiance, and she understood how dangerous this was. The council members exchanged glances, clearly displeased, but Daniel pressed on. You have taught your people that bonds are a sign of unity and respect. Well, she and I have formed a bond built on choice, not command. That is something stronger than any tradition built on fear. One of the council members leaned forward. You speak of choice, yet you deny her the right to follow her duty. Daniel shook his head. It is not duty if it destroys her. It is not honor if it is forced. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel even across the vast distance of the transmission. Lyra stepped forward, then her voice calm but carrying a strength that surprised even Daniel. I am Lyra, daughter of the house you shamed when you chose me for this bond, she said. I remain with this human because I choose to, not because he commands me, not because the treaty says so. I choose it because for the first time in my life I am seen as an equal. Her words hung in the air, and Daniel saw a flicker of discomfort on a few council faces. They knew the danger of such a statement being broadcast openly. Too many of their own citizens might start to question the traditions they had been told were sacred. The council leader's voice came again, colder now. You will regret this defiance. And the screen went dark. The captain exhaled slowly. You just made a very dangerous enemy. Daniel turned to him. They were already our enemy. They just called themselves our ally. Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors lit up with an alert. The council's retrieval vessel had dropped out of faster-than-light travel, far closer than expected, and was already launching a boarding party. The alarms began to sound through the ship, red lights flashing in the corridors. Daniel moved quickly, giving orders to seal bulkheads and prepare the crew for non-lethal resistance. They could not risk open war, but they could not simply let the boarding team take her. Lyra stayed close to him, her face calm, but her hands clenched at her sides. She had lived her entire life under the authority of the council, and now for the first time she was standing on the edge of open rebellion beside someone from a species she had once been taught to fear. The thought was frightening, but also liberating in a way she could not put into words. As the first tremor of the docking clamp shuddered through the ship, Daniel knew the moment of decision had arrived. Whatever happened in the next hour would shape not only their lives, but the fragile future between their peoples. Vibration of the docking clamp still trembled faintly through the ship as the boarding party began its approach. The air on the command deck felt heavier, as if everyone aboard could sense the weight of what was coming. Daniel stood near the center console, his eyes fixed on the security feed showing the narrow corridor where the alien soldiers would enter. Their armor was a deep, burnished color, and their faces were hidden behind mirrored visors that gave away nothing. Their movements were quick and coordinated, each step a reminder that this was not a ceremonial visit, but a mission meant to be completed with precision and force. The captain's voice came over the comm, ordering all non-essential crew to remain in their quarters. Daniel gave no sign of stepping aside. Instead, he moved toward the corridor where the boarding team would arrive. Lyra walked with him, her head high and her shoulders squared. There was no hesitation in her steps, though Daniel could see the tension in her hands. She had made her choice, and she would see it through. When the first alien soldier stepped through the airlock, Daniel was already there, blocking the narrow space between the boarding point and the rest of the ship. The soldier's voice came through a mechanical filter. "Stand aside, human. Our orders are clear." Daniel's tone was steady. "Your orders violate the treaty and the will of the person you came to take. I will not step aside." More soldiers came through, their presence filling the corridor with the sharp metallic scent of their armor. The lead soldier moved closer, the mirrored visor reflecting Daniel's face back at him. "You cannot stop us," the soldier said, but Daniel's reply came without hesitation. "Then you will have to take me first, and you will have to do it in front of every witness who can see this transmission." Only then did the soldiers seem to notice the small camera mounted above the corridor, broadcasting everything across open diplomatic channels. It was already active, sending the image of Daniel standing like a wall before them, with Lyra behind him, her expression calm and proud. The broadcast was going not only to Earth but to Lyra's homeworld, and through the networks of traders and travelers, it was spreading to countless other systems. Lyra stepped forward to stand beside him, her voice carrying clearly, "I am not leaving with you. I am bonded to this human by my own choice, and I will not return to be used as a tool for the Council's games. If you take me now, you will prove to the galaxy that our bond is a lie and that your word means nothing." The soldier hesitated, clearly caught between the certainty of orders and the sudden awareness of how visible this moment had become. The hesitation grew as more voices began coming through the comm channel, people from her world, speaking in their own language, questioning why the Council would force someone to return against their will. Some were angry, others were simply confused, but all were watching. The lead soldier took a step back, the comm link in his helmet buzzing faintly with the sound of an order from someone higher up. Whatever was said caused him to turn slightly to his unit and motion for them to stand down. One by one the soldiers lowered their weapons, though they did not remove their hands from them. The leader's voice came, again more controlled now. "You will remain for the time being. This matter will be reviewed." They withdrew as quickly as they had arrived, leaving the airlock silent. Once more the clamps released, and the retrieval vessel drifted away without ceremony. The corridors of the ship felt different, now less like a place under siege, and more like a place that had just survived something important. Daniel let out a slow breath and turned to Lyra. "You just started something that will not be easy to finish," he said, but there was a trace of pride in his voice. She met his gaze. "I would rather live with what we started than die under what they planned." The captain called for them both on the comm, summoning them back to the command deck. The screen was already filled with messages from across the stars. Some were from human diplomats, others from alien citizens, all reacting to what they had seen. Some praised the defiance, others warned of the dangers ahead, but the most important thing was clear. The moment had been too public for the Council to erase without consequence. Later, when the ship settled back into its routine, Daniel stood once more by the observation window looking out at the deep stretch of space ahead. Lyra joined him wearing her ceremonial garment again, but it no longer looked like a symbol of submission. Instead, it seemed to carry the quiet strength of someone who had claimed her own fate. She stood beside him in silence for a while, watching the stars drift past. "It has been more than a month, human," she said finally, her voice softer now. "And you have taken something no one else ever could." Daniel glanced at her with a faint smile. "And what is that?" "My will," she said, "and my choice to give it to you freely." The stars beyond the window shone bright and endless, and for the first time since this mission had begun, Daniel felt that peace between their peoples was no longer just an agreement written in cold ink, but something alive and real, built on trust earned in the face of danger. As the ship moved forward into the dark expanse, they stood together, not as soldier and envoy, not as human and alien, but as equals bound by a decision that belonged only to them. The end.